Have you ever wondered what living your true, authentic life would be like? And doing so fearlessly, undeniably, and unapologetically? Is such a way of life even possible? My answer is yes, it is. Welcome to my podcast, From Fearful to Fierce. My name is Sarah Odogrosfordna, and I will be using this space to share simple, easy to implement tips on how to become the best version of yourself by living authentically, unapologetically, undeniably, and fearlessly. From Fearful to Fierce is based on my FFTF trilogy, which is available on Amazon, by the way. A series on the importance of knowing, accepting, and loving one's self. So, whether you are struggling with imposter syndrome, self doubt, or just looking to level up your confidence game, this podcast has got you covered. So, get ready to take on the world one fearless step at a time as this podcast unravels and tackles some of the issues that prevents us from becoming the best version of ourselves. Once again, I'm your host, Sarah Odogrosfordna. Parenting is your style, buffet, or a la carte. I'm sure lots of people are going to say, what does that even mean? One of the things I'm passionate about is food. A lot of people who know me know that I love food. I love to prepare food. I like to entertain with food. I like to just spoil people with food. And so in a sense, it was kind of like, it's kind of like apt that I should, when talking about parenting, I should kind of make an analogy based on food, the other passion of my life besides writing. And so the buffet style of parenting is when you take whatever latest style is out there or trend and just raise your kids based on that. Children are different. For example, if you have a child, 3 kids, or you have 5, however many you have, every one of those kids will be different. If you have one who is quiet, you may have one who is excessively talkative. Now, if you try to apply the same style of raising the quiet one to the raising the talkative one, you're going to run into problem, no? And so when you're raising a child, you just have to have common sense. But unfortunately, these days, for whatever reason, parents just, take whatever the latest trend tells them. And some parents, and they raise their kids based on those trends. We are going to come to that. Now, a la carte, of course, as the name implies or the term implies, if you go to a restaurant, you can have a buffet. Everything is set out. Everyone eats from the same thing. But a la carte menu is the one that you pick yourself and you say, this is what I want to eat. So parenting a child a la carte is where you are using your own common sense based on what your values are as a parent and based on what you know about that child, because you have certain expectations. You have certain ways you would like the child to turn out, your child. So you parent him based on the values you have and based on the outcome that you like to see when that child grows up. Let me tell you just a little story before we get onto that. Because as you all know, or some of you know out there, I'm a storyteller. So I prefer to say I'm a storyteller, actually. So I like to use stories to make some of my points. And I met this woman. She was introduced to me. She had a child at that time. The child was, I think, about 6. And so they came to visit. I invited them to my home. And the moment this child entered my home with the mother, he wanted to touch everything. He went into the kitchen. He ran into my sitting room. He touched all the artifacts, everything, basically everything in my home. The child wanted to touch or touched within few minutes of entering. It's a child, of course. And kids are behave like that way because they don't understand. They don't know any better. So I actually expected the mother to say, oh, no, darling, don't touch that. Don't do that. Although she did say it, but she said it without authority. And because she did not say it, there was no authority behind uh, our words, the child just went ahead and did whatever he wanted to do. So at a certain point, I was, of course, concerned because I had certain things that could break or even maybe hurt the child. So I just said, would you tell him to stop? Or even when he ran into my bedroom, which I thought was a little bit off, that's an invasion of someone's privacy. She just said, oh, darling, just come out. Don't be so naughty. The child did not, just went ahead and did what he wanted to. So at some point, I had to come in and I basically went to, take something from him to ask him to put the thing down, that he will get hurt. And what was the next reaction? Of course, you can imagine. He started just screaming the place down, just raising hell. And of course I said sorry, but I looked to the mother and I expected her to say, sit there or be quiet or something like that. She did not. She just again said, oh, come, darling, don't raise that such of racket. Come on. The lady is just saying, put something down. She did. And the child just went on. And so at some point I asked her, I said, I mean, is he always like this? I was careful the way I said it because I didn't want her to think I was judging the child. But in a way, I was judging. I was judging her, not the child. And she just said, oh, yeah, well, kids are kids. Kids will be kids. I don't really like to kind of like tell him, like restrict him because I don't want to stifle his individuality. I was like, say what? You can imagine what was going through my mind. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, yes, that's just my own style of, raising my kids. I don't want to curb their enthusiasm too much because it might affect them in future. In my mind, I was like, this kind of behavior would definitely affect this child in future. And so there's something here when I was watching this woman and the way that she was going on about her child. I realized something about certain women. And of course, please don't get me wrong here. These are all, of course, my opinion, my views. This is my podcast. So, of course, what you're going to be hearing here are going to be my views. They're not going to be views of everyone out there, but you're here listening to my podcast. So I'm going to use my views. So what I have observed about certain parents when raising their kids is that they tend to raise those kids as if they're afraid of those children. They don't want to upset them. And along the way, in my journey of life and also being a mother, I've come to also a certain conclusion that some of this, the way that they just allow the kids to go on without any boundary, is because of a sense of guilt. As a parent, we are very busy. Because we want our kids to have the best, sometimes the things that we didn't have. So we work long hours, perhaps, and we don't spend as much time as we would like with our children. And so for that reason, when we do spend time with our kids, some of those parents just allow their kids to be because they already have this sense of guilt. They think, okay, I don't spend much time with him or her. And now that I do, I'm not going to be telling him off about everything. So they just allow the child to get away with anything. But is that doing the child any good? So they raise these children without boundaries as a result of a certain sense of guilt. As a parent, in fact, one of the essential elements of raising a child and raising that child properly is common sense. You cannot just go out and take whatever everybody's doing and just say, I'm going to raise my child. Whatever latest trend, if they tell you, don't tell a child off, you will damage him, or don't curb some of his enthusiasm, or it's going to stifle his personality, all kinds of things. And you just take all of those things on board and bring them all out and then use those to raise your kids. And then we are surprised when our kids grow up to be adults with complete lack of boundaries. You are what you put in, your child is what you put in them. Parenting is when you instill values. It's like even these days when you have someone is going to have a child, although it's good to read books about, kids, how to raise a child and all of that. But sometimes a parent will completely even ignore what our instinct is telling her, and she'll just pick up a book instead of listening to what your inner mind is telling you about what your child needs. Unfortunately, a lot of modern parents pick friending and ignore the parenting. Whether you like it or not, what I'm about to say or not, you are not your child's friend. You are his parent, his or her parent. And it's your responsibility to raise that child with value, to think first that you're his parent or is or a parent before you think of yourself or as his or a friend. The way that you want that child to grow, train him from the beginning. It's not when he's 18 years old you now see him disrespect someone and you're like, oh, why did you speak to that man like that? That was not very respectful. But guess what? You did not put the respect in him when he was a child. So how else you expect him to be now that he's 18? It's not suddenly going to morph into a respectful youth. Unfortunately, as was the case in the woman I was talking about, she focused more on the friending than on the parenting. We are responsible. We are accountable to the ways that our kids are going to turn out. You have the odd one out, of course, where you do everything that you do and your child would still not turn out the way that you want that child to turn out, But in majority of the time, the values you put in the child, even when that child misbehaves a little, you will still be able to see signs. For example, it's like planting corn. You can plant corn and you go to the fields of corn and all the other corns will look really, really very nice and blooming. And you see one corn and it's not looking as fantastic as the others. But you will still be able to identify that it's still a corn. So the point I'm making here is that whatever value you put in your child, even when that child misbehaves along the way, you're still going to see signs of that value. So a child is like planting anything. Whatever you plant, there still will be times. In conclusion, I read some time ago, if your child has not told you at some point, especially when they are teenagers, if they have not told you, I hate you, then you're not doing a good job as a parent. But you know what? A teenager who hates you, or maybe a child who will be an adult who is loved not just by you, but by the society in future. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, this is From Fearful to Fierce by Sarah Udo Grossfatner. Until next time, keep striving to become the best version of yourself. Live intentionally, be unapologetic, be bold, be fearless. Before I forget, don't forget to subscribe to my podcast, like the different episodes, and press the notification button so that when I bring out new episodes, you'll be notified. Thank you very much. Until next time.